Hi gamers, Paul again. Last time we talked about the ScanDisk flight model. This time the topic is iterations in game design. In our last video we mentioned going through a lot of iterations of the flight model before we were happy with it. This time we're going to discuss our most recent iterations of BitShifter development. This is going to take a while. You might want to go grab some popcorn or something.
Phenomena. Phenomena. Phenomena.
Okay, so in getting ready for our alpha release on Desura, we were focusing on two main questions. First, how do we teach the game without ruining the fun? Our previous tutorial was awful. It took far too long, 8 whole levels, and it constantly interrupted the action to over-explain things. It also relied too much on reading prior to playing. The second question was, how do we find the sweet spot for our core game mechanic? What makes a BitShifter level the most exciting? This was mostly a pacing problem within a single level. There would be lulls in gameplay. So, what did we do? First, through many iterations, we figured out how to teach the game without ruining the fun. We moved all the instruction out of the talk bubbles and into objectives that pop up on your screen but don't take away control. The talk bubbles now only contain a newly written, more interesting story that gives you context for what you're doing, but can be ignored. Click through. We were able to compress all the instruction down to only 2 levels. The second thing we did was make 4 more levels with our most refined gameplay, each a little harder than the last, and cap it off with a boss level. So, how did all that work out? It worked out pretty well. We released the game with those 7 levels on Desura and got some great reviews. A lot of what we did worked really well. People got the game and had fun.
Protect my bits. This is very, very fun. It's a very simple concept, but it does work nicely. I've got 3 lots of mobs. Leave my bits alone!
So is this game worth a buy? Yes. In an alpha state, it's a fantastic example of how to do it. Plastic Games have done so well in the development of this game. I am so impressed that this is an alpha.
But not everything we did worked. We heard things like, the play got repetitive, the boss is too easy, is there more to the game? We thought, wow, they are exactly right. What had we done wrong? This was a call to action. With no time to waste, we instantly sat down and watched a bunch of videos. We realized, yes, the boss is too easy. Our pacing is new, and we don't have enough meaningful choices during gameplay. The first problem was spelled out for us by a reviewer. Beating the boss doesn't require the skills learned in levels A1 to A6. Ironically, we built a boss for the B system that does require you to apply the lessons you've learned. But we utterly failed to do this on the A system. We have changed that and fixed this problem. The repetitive gameplay was a problem with pacing. This time, not within a level, but across levels.
Take a look at this here chart. I don't know who made it, I found it years ago and I haven't been able to find it again since, but this right here, this is pacing. Let's have a closer look. This graph represents an ideal example of pacing, provided by Star Wars: A New Hope. The curve shows our engagement with the film at any given time. Many young designers make the mistake of thinking that each moment in a game has to be bigger and better than the last. They think their game has to plot a straight line, constantly climbing higher, when in reality, that's actually kinda counterproductive. The thing is, human beings get acclimated to stimuli. The player's overall enjoyment of your work will actually increase if you alternate between periods of intense engagement and periods of rest.
We totally made this mistake. Here is how our levels looked when plotted on the interest curve. We don't have any levels that dial back on the tension. So we made new levels that have a different feel to them. They are a bit more about fighting and exploring than strategy. These new levels will appear between the more fast-paced levels to provide the right pacing and bring down the action. Finally, we realized we were introducing game features too slowly. We actually have lots of game features already implemented, from new enemies and new weapons to power-ups and bombs, but we didn't give the player any of those things, and those lulls in gameplay was still there.
Today we're going to talk about how to balance depth and complexity in video games. Or more accurately, we're going to talk about what the proper relationship between the two is. Basically, it is the designer's job to get the maximum amount of depth out of the minimum amount of complexity. I could probably just end this episode right there, but just for kicks, let's unpack what that means, starting with depth. Depth is simply the number of emergent, experientially different possibilities or meaningful choices that come out of one rule set. So, for example, tic-tac-toe is light on depth, because the rules don't create a plethora of experientially different possibilities for the player. Depth is entirely a mental activity. If players can't think around, should I use my rocket launcher or my machine gun, if they can't make a conscious choice about it, then there is no depth. Whether it be something like League of Legends, Magic the Gathering, or Call of Duty, the depth comes in the player's ability to make meaningful choices with the options the rules present to them, and their ability to learn from the outcomes of those choices. Without those two components, you don't have depth. I do believe it is the designer's job to look for the most bang for your buck in terms of depth to complexity. So, to answer the statement as it is usually posed on message boards, no, more complex games aren't better, deeper ones are.
So the problem was there wasn't enough meaningful choices, and not all the features of the game were relevant to the other features. For example, in the game you collect bugs, which are like coins. But all they do is unlock lore for you to read. They don't affect the gameplay at all. We had also planned that your access to items would be based on what you chose to clean first, but this didn't work. What you cleaned was dictated by viral threat. It turns out you really didn't have that choice.
First, let's talk about differences in scale. Differences in scale are achieved by simply incrementing a variable. You've seen it time and again. A game throws more enemies at you, gives you more ammo, increases your health bars, or makes the enemies tougher. It's one of the most common ways we try to modulate interest in games. In fact, using this technique exclusively is one of the biggest stumbling blocks I often see for young designers. We've talked about the interest curve in the past, and it's with relation to the interest curve that the problems with differences in scale become clear. You see, by throwing out more enemies, by simply making them stronger and tougher and better and faster, you can only drive interest linearly upwards. You can't create any of the curves or the shifts in tone that make the interest curve effective. To do that, we need differences in kind. Differences in kind are just that, differences in tone, parts of the game that feel different.
Our final move addresses these problems and the pacing issue as well. We added blank item generators. The player gets to choose what these blank generators will make, and exactly where to deploy it. Now that they pay for generator upgrades, the coins themselves are more meaningful, but they also give us a nice way to help with the pacing. Bonus levels. The bonus levels have a different goal. Pick up as many bug coins as you can before the time runs out. They feel very different from the regular levels, and they are good maps to replay to stack up on coins. How have all these features helped? We will let you know once we have patched the game and we get some more feedback. Look for BitShifter on Desura Alpha Funding, a hextraordinary game for hextraordinary people.